Hi, I'm Justin Barrett. I'm president of Blueprint 1543. I'm a former university professor and psychological scientist. Welcome. On this episode, I'd like to talk about sports fandom and whether it is an outworking of what you might think of as our coalitional instinct. This topic comes from a viewer named Ken, who asks the following question. Ken asks, how does sports fandom and the coalition instinct connect together? We just got through with March Madness. Everyone has pretty strong tribal affiliation to their alma mater, college team, whether football, basketball, or maybe their home pro team. Is this cognitive tribal affiliation a healthy funnel for evolutionary psychological needs for us to tribalize? Do we have the need to tribalize, and is this a working out of it? To answer Ken's question, I need to give us just a little bit of something to think about. The difference between a proper domain and an actual domain for a tool to be used in. So you think of spoons and hammers. We'll start with spoons and hammers. So you might think the proper domain or proper use of a hammer is to hammer nails. And so we use a hammer to hammer nails, but you can, actual domain, use a hammer to do things like, I don't know, swat flies, or as a paperweight, or to knock old televisions into working order, whatever you need to do. So there's the proper domain, hammering nails, and the actual domain, all of these other things we can use a hammer for. Or think about a spoon. Proper domain, feeding yourself. Actual domain, digging in the yard, playing at the beach, making music, or who knows what, right? There are lots of possibilities. It seems that a helpful way of thinking about human minds is that we've got all of these tools in our head, and they too have proper domains and actual domains. So a snake, for instance, is something that we have a sensitivity to. It's easy to form a fear association with snakes, and we're very sensitive to snake-like motions in our environment. The actual domain for this cognitive tool in our head, the snake detector, is to find snakes. But earthworms, a garden hose, and all kinds of other things can activate that snake detector. So the actual domain of activation is much broader than the proper domain. Likewise with face detection, we have gadgets in our head to help us pick out human-like faces, eyes and a mouth. The proper domain for their use is human faces. The actual domain, though, could be much broader than that. It could include maybe dogs' faces, cats' faces, cartoons, animations, all kinds of masks, and all kinds of other face-like things can activate that same psychological system. So proper domain, what it's kind of designed for, actual domain, where it actually operates. So back to Ken's question, we can revise his question a little bit and say, does sports fandom satisfy the conditions for the actual domain of some psychological tools that are designed for a different domain, specifically the domain of forming cooperative clans and coalitions? Is fandom related to Clandom? And I think the answer is yes. It sure looks like fandom, sports fandom, college sports and all of that, piggybacks on many of the same psychological systems, tools, and dynamics of forming trusting groups. Humans are notoriously groupish, it's sometimes called. That is, it's easy for us to form groups. We do it readily, we do it easily. There are these textbook examples of experiments where all you have to do is randomly assign people to being in this group or that group, and then maybe put a colored shirt or a jersey on them, and suddenly they are two different groups. What do I mean they're suddenly two different groups? Well, they think that members of their group are smarter, more talented, more virtuous than members of that other group, even though they just saw that they were randomly assigned to their group membership. The outgroup is often stereotyped as well and thought to be much more similar to each other than our group, which is interesting and diverse, and we're all individuals here. And of course, we're much more willing to trust and to cooperate with members of that in-group. Even if it's something as arbitrary as wearing a different colored shirt, forming these groups can be done very easily. And that's been done experimentally over and over and over and over again. It seems that we've got the psychological tools that are meant to help us form groups, and they do. They work really well. So then we might ask, well, what's the proper domain of our groupishness, or what's sometimes called a coalitional instinct? At least a plausible story that has been researched fairly carefully is that groups of extended relatives, or our clans, or close friends and neighbors are probably that proper domain of the application of this groupishness. We needed to form groups that have high degrees of trust and coordination to solve what you may think of as cooperative problems, such as long-term childcare investment. Babies don't just raise themselves. Famously it says it takes a village. Well, it at least takes aunts and uncles and grandmothers and grandfathers and neighbors and so forth to collectively raise the kids, because kids grow up so slowly. And of course, I don't just mean keeping them alive, but teaching them the tricks of the trade, what to eat and not to eat, how to care for themselves, how to hunt and gather, or create tools or use tools, or all of the things that are needed to survive. It takes a whole lot of people to contribute to the development of a child. That's a cooperative problem, and it takes holding people together in a willing cooperative kind of unit or group. So maybe our groupishness contributes to that. Other needs are things like, hunting big game. How do you bring down a mastodon or woolly mammoth? It takes a group, it takes a team to coordinate our activities together. And we need to trust each other to all be there for each other doing something dangerous like that. Or maybe it's complex food preparation. Humans for a long time have been eating things, not just meats, but also nuts like acorns and things that require lots of step-by-step preparation. Do the steps wrong, you could get parasites or you could poison yourself. And so we need to learn from each other, and maybe we even have specialized tools, or need to be able to create fire, and not everybody's equally good at making fire, or whatever it is. We've got these coordination and cooperation problems that we need each other. We need good groups in order to solve these problems. And then, of course, there's warfare. If the village over the hill decides to attack us, we all need to be able to defend our village from those attackers. So warfare is, of course, a perennial cooperative problem. So our groupishness, our ability to form cooperative, trusting groups of people who are not necessarily all related to each other, is a really important adaptive kind of thing for us humans to be able to do. So important that it sometimes looks like what are sometimes called instincts. And so sometimes this is called a coalitional instinct or groupishness or something like that. So proper domain is probably those cooperative problems that have been with humanity forever. Actual domain? Well, sports teams and sports fandom. Music fandom. I mean, Swifties are doing this stuff too, right? Street gangs, organized crime units, political parties, military units, religious congregations and religious orders, and many, many others can be the actual domains for this groupishness. That just needs, these social arrangements just need to push the right buttons, the right input conditions to activate the system, to turn it on. What are some of those buttons? Distinctive clothing. If we dress differently than most people and we dress sort of alike, whether it's color or style, that's a signal that we're a group. And it kind of makes sense because, distinctive villages would have had distinctive ways of dressing back in the day. Having common insider knowledge, jargon, ways of speaking, things we talk about, allegiance to particular leaders that other people don't have allegiance toward. Common routines and rituals can trigger these. And especially common, what are sometimes called superordinate goals, or big umbrella goals that draw us all together that we're all working toward, like that successful hunt or winning the battle. And then this groupishness can be enhanced by activities that are sometimes called social grooming, like group singing, laughter, rhythmic or synchronized movement, and physical touch. All things that activate our endorphin system, oxytocin, and other kind of bonding chemicals that make us feel like we're part of this bigger unit, that we can trust each other, and that we want to cooperate and even make sacrifices for the group. Collegiate and other professional sports sometimes push these buttons really well. Do we have that common distinctive clothing? Sure, we put on the jerseys for game day, right? Check. Insider knowledge about player history, team history, weird things we talk about and references we make that we understand that other people don't. It's there. Synchronized movements. Think about fans in the stadium who might be doing the wave together. It makes them feel like they're part of a big thing. Or synchronized clapping, cheers, and chants. even singing, like those fight songs that we sing. It's all there. Those are the types of things that socially groom us, bind us together, and make us feel part of the group. So I think Ken, in his question, is definitely on the right track. But notice he also asked, is this cognitive tribal affiliation a healthy funnel for evolutionary psychological needs for us to tribalize? Is it a healthy funnel? That it's the case that some thoughts, feelings, and behaviors fall in the actual domain of one of these psychological tools or gadgets, but not in the proper domain, it doesn't tell us whether it's good or bad. Ken's question suggests that maybe we have a need to be part of groups, and sports fandom is a way to let out that need in a relatively benign way. And maybe that's right. I mean, as long as you can keep your commitments to the team in perspective, if you're not sort of overdoing it, if you're not villainizing the people from the other university and mistreating them, it can be fun and exciting to be part of a group or movement that's bigger than oneself. I mean, I remember in college definitely rooting, for my college basketball team. I was part of the There's No Hope chants. And, I feel like I was a part of rooting on 2 national championships. But that's if we can keep that sort of groupishness in proper perspective. This kind of analysis where we're considering the psychological foundations of our groupishness, I think help us to see why it is that behaviors, attitudes, and even these groups that we form that have really very little real life meaning can take on oversized significance. And maybe that should give us a little pause to ask ourselves things like, is our devotion to our sports team or to a musician or to a political movement or whatever making us into the best version of ourselves? Is it making us who God would want us to be? Are we investing more in our connection to these social bonds at the expense of real relationships that matter in a more day-to-day and important kind of long-term way? Are we investing too much in terms of time, emotional energy, or money in our fandom? I remember at one point I had to give up in some ways watching sports, professional and collegiate, because I found myself too emotionally invested, and it was taking up too much time that I needed to spend doing other things in my life, things that frankly were more important to me. The reason that it's so seductive is that it seems to be flipping these switches that activate our coalitional psychology or our groupishness. And so I think that should make us be a little more careful and give us pause. After all, the word fan really is just short for fanatic. So Ken, thanks for your question. Please keep watching. Feel free to send more questions in. Of course, anyone, send more questions on topics that you'd like to hear me talk about. I'm Justin Barrett from Blueprint 1543. Thanks for joining me.